So I'm Stefan, for those three of you who haven't met me yet, maybe. I'm the chief architect here at Sumo Logic, and I've been with the company for 9 years. And this is George Gerchow, our CISO, and we'll walk you through our journey to FedRAMP. So as you know, I'm sure all of you know what FedRAMP is, otherwise you wouldn't be here. But I'm also guessing all of you appreciate to some degree what a pain in the neck it is to go through FedRAMP certification. So I'm going to talk a little bit about the engineering side of that. That's been going on for probably close to 2 years in our case since we started. And I won't say that it's been actively going on the entire time, but it's a pretty long drawn-out process, right? So just to throw it up here for people who may watch this offline who have never heard of FedRAMP, this is sort of the catchy definition of FedRAMP on the FedRAMP.gov site, which I Googled and looked up when I was putting the slide deck together, and I kind of had to laugh at this a little bit because, having gone through this now, there's absolutely nothing that simplifies anything about this, right? This is, in my mind, how I would define it, the US government applying sort of its old and tried and true and tested rules for how you secure servers in the federal government, with pretty incomplete comprehension for what the cloud is and how people run in the cloud, and sort of coming up with guidelines for how one should run in the cloud, right? And so they throw these at vendors, and vendors need to somehow comply to this standard now. Wow, I think we just tripled our audience. Amazing.
Awesome.
It was two more people showed up. No?
It was the emoji.
It was the emoji. There
and
you
the cookie.
And the cookie. So anyways, this is the two of us, as well as, where did he go? Patrick back there, who's our federal compliance manager, in front of the General Services Administration 3 months ago, something like that, after going through our FedRAMP Readiness Assessment Review.
Mm-hmm. The RAR.
So the fun story here is it took us about 20 minutes to pass the security checkpoint going into this building, because both George and I traveled, from outside of DC. Patrick's a local, and we both had our backpacks full of laptops, iPads, cables, and some other people there decided that every single cable we had in our backpacks needed individual inspection before letting us into this building to talk to a few people. And so that kind of set the tone for the whole thing on many levels, right?
It was funny because it was like a merry-go-round, because he would go through first, and then he'd set a bunch of stuff off, take stuff out of his bag, then I'd go through, set some stuff off, take stuff out of my bag, and literally we both went through, I'd say probably 5 times or so, while Patrick sat inside and laughed at us. And we just got an email the other day from one of the folks at GSA that was saying that Stefan and I still have the record for taking 2 people the longest to get through security to going into the building. So it did definitely set the tone.
And I didn't mention this earlier. Patrick's a pro at this. He's actually, worked on the other side. He's worked for the federal government, and he's actually, despite that, still a pretty reasonable person. So he showed up with minimal nothing, proper attire, everything. Notice he's the only one wearing an actual jacket and a shirt. But so anyways, we get there, and there's, a set of auditors that have read this document that over many months Patrick and others have prepared with a third-party audit firm, describing how we're meeting all of these controls, providing some evidence. And the greetings went something like this, hello, my name is such and such, you guys need to do DNS Sec. So somehow, that was the one thing they had decided we absolutely couldn't get away without. And everybody here who knows something about security knows that DNSSEC by and large is not considered a very effective way to increase your security, but there had been an incident a few months prior with the DHS, I think, where they had convinced themselves that the way to have mitigated that incident and prevented it was DNS Sec. So therefore, everybody now needed to do DNS Sec. So anyways, all along, what basically I've tried to set as the goal for the team was, given how this FedRAMP set of controls came about, I'm not interested at all in meeting, to the letter, these old crusty things that somehow got cloud washed into cloud controls. I'm interested in passing the audit. That's all I want to do. And so the mental model I'm trying to give the team is the following, right? So there is a set of things here on the left that are controls that materially improve the security of our platform. I'm all for implementing those, getting those right. And then there's this other set on the other side of this Venn diagram that is purely paperwork and implementations that get in the way, that don't really improve security in any material way. And then there's sort of this, it's not gray, but gray area in between, this like blue-greenish area in between. And so what has helped quite a bit in going through this is, try to subtract that filter of, where these controls came from, and figure out what was the intent here. Like, what do people actually want to accomplish with this control? And often there's good intent behind it. It's just expressed in a very, not familiar with how clouds work, not familiar how continuous deployment work kind of a way, right? There's questions in there about, what kind of lock is on the door to your data center in AWS, right? This doesn't make sense. And so I just mapped a few in here, and you'll see DNS Sec that I mentioned earlier on the right here. There's things like, they made us put anti-malware tools on our Linux server that are, a baked army that never receives any outside code into it. Also makes no sense, but you don't get the checkbox without having that on there, so you just go and install the damn thing, right? And then there's other things that are actually genuinely helpful. We had back in 2010, 2011 come up with a way to manage SSH keys that was secure but fairly awkward and pretty difficult to follow for auditors in particular. And so we replaced that with an off-the-shelf commercial solution called Teleport. We tightened up further our GitHub permissions. Being a startup, we had a pretty relaxed and open permission model because we inherently trust our developers. We background check them all and all of that. But looking at it, it materially reduces the blast radius of any one developer to lock that down, right? I won't read it all to you. You can read it for yourself. But so that's been a helpful model, mostly to figure out where we should really focus our engineering efforts and where we should, do the minimal thing we can get away with, right? So on the right, minimal thing to get away with. On the left, really invest. The other thing that's been a bit frustrating about this whole process is, we hired an outside audit firm that was supposed to sort of do a gap analysis between what we had and, what FedRAMP requires, produce a list, and then we would go off and, fill the gaps in the list and come back and sort of move on, right? But what in fact happened was they did that, but then for several months, they kept then finding additional stuff that wasn't on the original list. And some of them were pretty material effort engineering projects, right? So, we, in our engineering planning and sort of budgeting, we went off the original list, but they kept on coming back and asking for more. And that was really frustrating to sort of everyone involved on the engineering side, because it was really unpredictable, and there was always this question, are we done yet? Are they going to come up with yet another thing they didn't think of before? So yeah, auditors are an interesting, sort of group of people in general, I would say. Here's the thing. So this is something that Patrick mentioned once that stuck with me, and that I've actually taught others that are going into this meeting. So when you're going through these audits, you sit in these meetings where these auditors are quizzing you and asking you to produce evidence for certain things, right? And the way to act in those meetings is this, be polite, answer questions as asked, don't volunteer any information, right? Because all that happens when you volunteer information is one of two things. Either it confuses them, and that's not good because then they sort of pull on that string and more stuff comes out, or they, uncover a whole new set of things that you now need to document and describe. And so, to that end, it was actually pretty funny when we were in that audit at the GSA that I showed the picture of. We had this document up on the screen, and the people auditing us kept on pointing out, your diagram shows this word, but the text makes no mention of this word, or vice versa. And so pretty much every time that happened, we would just delete whatever word they only found in one place, and they were totally fine with that. It wasn't like, so we just kept on trimming down this document that we produced, and passed the audit. But so at the end of the day, it's a long, grueling process. As you can see by the size of this group, it takes an acquired taste to have an appreciation for it. It's not sort of for the mass market, but I think George will talk a little bit more about why we still think it's a good investment, and time will tell, but he'll talk a little bit more about the business side of this thing.
Yeah, absolutely.
And the clicker to you. There you go.
Thank you. And so one of the biggest things I have to say, and there's been a lot of people that have approached me, Patrick, Stefan, over the course of the last few months as to why. Why are you doing this? Why are you going through this massive undertaking to get FedRAMP done? And I'll tell you now, again, and one of our core values is transparency. And in full transparency to you, our customers, our prospects, we did a really shitty job of figuring out the why piece. Most of our pressure actually came from this. So you can see some of you may be up here as well too. Auxiliary tech companies or companies that were customers of ours that supported the federal government that used Sumo logic so we fit within their federal boundaries, and because we weren't FedRAMP certified, they then had to fill out what's called an ISA, right, to have compensating controls shown, or they were threatening to drop Sumo for the most frustrating thing in the world. Like, look, if we lose competitively with someone and they have more value, I'm down. But they were going back on-prem, because the only certified products or the only way they could get a product in for a cloud-based certification was to go back on-prem. Makes no sense, okay? So we made a commitment to our customers that we were going to go out and start going down this journey. As you can see, lots of great logos here, lots of folks out there who are also doing it as well too. But the biggest thing I would say from the beginning, and Aaron and you and I were talking just a minute ago, is a justified business case. And what I mean by this is sales in general, whether it's a CRO, VP of sales, someone on a sales front has to come back and guarantee X number of revenue back into the company based on retention revenue as well as new revenue for a vertical, which is Fed. At Sumo, we really just never did those analytics. We focused more on the retention side of it. So a proper business case, I believe, is the first step, and then have sales and strategic alliances work on that together. And then you can use security as kind of the catalyst to drive this and get it done after you've made sense of that and you have targeted KPIs that you can reach as you're going through this process. The biggest thing on our side too as well on the business challenges was engineering resources. We need this guy and our entire engineering team most of the time working on new product and feature sets to deliver to our customers. So there's debt when we turn around and react to the federal government as we're going through this process that we're not going to be able to give to our customers because we're working on this on the back end. And so that piece of it hurt. And what he said is true. It's reaction all the time. Like even the CDNs Sec thing, you have a couple of weeks to get this done or you have a month to get this done. And that process doesn't stop, by the way, as you get through it, because as you're providing conmons and reports to agencies, they're going to have more and more things they're going to want to see you do as well too. So it's really difficult, especially because I came from the PM world. What I want to do in my relationship with him is say, I need 3% of engineering time this quarter, next quarter 5% for back-end platform type things. With Fed, you can't do that. It's very, very reactionary. So we try to make it as predictable as possible. The last piece on that side is the high cost piece. It's been a very expensive process. We're in the millions right now. And very short term revenue coming back in. Again, from the commercial side, it's had a great effect. All of our partners that you saw on those slides, they're like thrilled. They're like, great, we can continue doing business as usual with the federal government and using Sumo. but we haven't seen the recognition yet in the federal world, which we can have offline conversations about. I have some opinions around that, but so far in the federal space, we just haven't seen much traction yet, and it could be as to where we're at. Really quickly on the technical challenges side, Stefan talked about this a bit, but putting in our ALBs in place, the DNS Sec thing, it was so funny. He doesn't give himself enough credit. When we were in that meeting, and Patrick was there too, and they started pressing us about DNS Sec, I'm like, I don't see it as a requirement. Can you show me where that's a requirement for FedRAMP certification? And it's not a requirement, but they kept on pressing back. I was pushing back because that's my personality. And finally, he just looked at me, pointed at the Slack channel, and he was like, dude, if you continue down this path, they're going to rip apart everything else that we're trying to present in here. Because that's a 5-hour meeting that you're getting a root canal in front of these auditors. And a lot of times, like when he was talking about deleting things, we literally in that meeting had to explain what an API was multiple times. They absolutely did not fundamentally understand what an API is. So it can be rather frustrating, and you got to be really calm when you're in those meetings and just try to be as clear as possible. Then the other piece that we had to do too, which I think is a good thing, is the FIPS 140-2 crypto on the collector side of the house. So this is kind of the journey that we went through and where we're at today. A few things that I want to cover on really quickly. The first one was, where do we deploy? Do we go into GovCloud? Is that going to be our option? Or AWS and even Google have been good enough to make the rest of their environments in the US FedRAMP compliant. So they have the FIPS 140-2 crypto on the endpoints. We could not go GovCloud because of the lack of microservices to support our application. So think about this. Anyone who goes into GovCloud today, you have very limited services, AWS services, that you can run against your platform. It'll probably taken a whole refactoring of our solution to be able to run in GovCloud. So we made a decision to go into US East 1. And it took a while to get there, So in the meantime, we were working with Coalfire as a preliminary consultant to get what's called our SSPs, or System Security Process Documents, done, and then also making decisions about the environment. So once we ended up getting all that ready, and again, one of the biggest mistakes that I made in this process was I should have brought on someone like Patrick a year ahead of time, because we already started engaging with Coalfire. We're talking to engineering. They're reacting, we're reacting. I have 5 other audits going on at the time. So we're like half dipping into this thing and then coming back out, and no one really owned it until Patrick came on board. So then after that, we ended up getting to the point where we wanted to get our RAR, a readiness assessment review, together. Patrick's on board, and we have to, at that point, engage a 3PAL, or third-party assessment organization, which we went Kratos, which Kratos is dedicated only to the federal government. After that point, we ended up filling out our documents. That's when we did the 5-hour meeting. And then really funny thing, the next couple steps here, and I don't know if I have slides on this, I don't think I do, but there's 3 major steps. The first one is FedRAMP ready. The next one's in process. And then the last one is full ATO. Don't get fooled by that in process piece in the middle. Okay, the in-process piece, hey, congrats to anyone who has it, but it's an email. It is literally a fucking email that you get, that is sent by a federal agency into the government saying, we're going to sponsor this company. So that means that they didn't do a readiness assessment like we did. They didn't do a SAR. They didn't do DNS Sec or all these other things. So you don't know. It's just a letter saying that you're in process and on the website. Which, by the way, we desperately want that letter, but we've done a lot to get to this point, so we're ready to go. And then the last piece is obviously ATO. So right now, we are FedRAMP ready. We submitted with the JAB, or the Joint Advisory Board, to go through what's called a PATO, for those of you who know FedRAMP. Now, the problem was, by the time we got FedRAMP ready, we had a week to submit to the JAB because of the timeline for last quarter to get a PATO. We got selected to go into the second round of the JAB, and then finally one day, 4 months later, I think it was, Patrick, we got an email from them saying Sumo wasn't selected for the overall process. So we get on a debrief call a month later. The reason why we didn't get selected is because we weren't FedRAMP ready when we submitted. So think about this. The federal government did not have the aptitude to go back and go, okay, now that we're reviewing the app, are they on the website? And are they FedRAMP ready? They took us for the point of entry. And so 1 week gap killed us there. So then now we're back into the JAB process starting September 13th. We believe that we'll be selected, but in the meantime, we're maniacally looking for sponsoring agencies. Big takeaways for me, so from my side of the house, kind of owning the business piece, the great relationship with engineering. I don't know, Jeff Gill, I saw him around in the audience earlier, but he ran a lot of this from the engineering side as well too. That's been good, it's forced us both to really work together in unison to try to get this done for a company. We believe too that as of right now, there is no cloud-based logging or analytics solution that's FedRAMP certified. None. So we should be the first one to go to market and be in that category. So we're extremely proud of that, and we're looking forward to that as well too. We're going moderate status, again in US East 1. And then finally, I believe that by achieving this level of extra security and extra audit, it's going to give us more confidence within our customer base to trust us with your data moving forward. So in closing, I guess, my opinion, and we'll take yours really quickly too, I think it's been worth it so far, but I think we could have done a lot of things a little bit more efficiently along the way. And if you're thinking about going down this route, the number one thing is make sure you got that business plan in place and then start executing according to those goals and KPIs.
And if you're thinking of going down this route, pin us down, we can help. We're in it
Great
with
point.
customers, especially on this. We've been fortunate enough to be able to talk to some of our other customers and partners as we've gone through this. We'll pay the same forward to anyone here who's going through this and share our learnings from this. I'll say, like I said earlier, there have been meaningful improvements from this. I think from my perspective, wearing my engineering hat, there's a lot of stuff that is of not much engineering value in this, but from a business perspective, this is most certainly a valuable thing to have done. And with that, we've got 5, 4, 3, 2, 1 done. Any questions? Yes. Hang on. Sorry.
How long did the process take from start to where you are now?
It's been 2 years. It's been 2 years,
Yeah.
but let me clarify a little bit of that too.
This isn't 2 years of constant
Right.
work. This is like stop, go a little bit, and then like submit a thing, wait for the thing, submit a thing, wait for the thing kind of thing.
Yeah, but there's also a hidden cost that we didn't talk about. So one, if we would have had Patrick, we'd have probably kept the same velocity. But think about this, you have to spin up a brand new territory like US East 1, right? Well, that thing is sitting there with nothing in it. So that costs money. And so for a while we were scaling it up, scaling it down, and then eventually we had to leave it open. So that's another thing that I forgot to mention, but it's been 2 years accumulatively for sure.
Yeah.
It'll probably be another year. I'm guessing before ATO. Patrick. Any other last minute? We could probably take one more question.
Once and twice.
Twice.
All
Awesome.
right.
Cool.
Thank you guys for coming.
Thank you very much.
More of an audience than I thought.
Go Nuggets. Go Nuggets.